This is a review of the ASRock Challenger 9070 XT graphics card. I just upgraded from a EVGA 3080 12 gig. This is the second upgrade I've done for this system that I built in 2020. Originally, it had a 3700X CPU and a 5700 XT. And I went to Microcenter with a buddy who built a high-end system, and more or less this was an impulse buy. The 3080 was still a very good card, but the ASRock has an extra 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's probably around 40% faster in rasterization titles, and I'm pretty satisfied with it so far. I'm CPU limited in a lot of games, but we're going to test a few out, including Doom Dark Ages. That's what's next. So, all right, Doom Dark Ages at 1440p Ultra Native Nightmare settings. This does have a path trace mode, which Radeon cards have gotten a lot better with ray tracing, but we're not going to test that out. So we're just going to do 1440p native. I'm going to fiddle around with the settings a little bit. TAA upscaling, which I just did that, because that's probably the default. Doom Dark Ages was probably one of my favorite titles of last year. It's the third in the newer Doom reboot trilogy. It's a great game. It has ray tracing on by default, and you can't turn it off. So this is a pretty heavy area. As we get into this, you can see the frame rate's around 80 frames per second or so. There'll be some dips down to 60, but this is at native resolution. And with my 3080 12 gig, before I could not run this game at native resolution at these frame rates. It's probably, I had to run DLSS upscaling at quality to get the same performance I'm getting with the ASRock 9070 XT at native. So, pretty good upgrade. The pairing system in this game is pretty easy, but it's really the key to mastering it on higher difficulties. It's just being able to do those slow parries and making sure that the little fodder demons don't get caught behind you. Okay, so now I'm going to turn on FSR upscaling. You do notice a image quality hit, but the frame rate considerably improves. I would say it probably looks a little bit worse than DLSS 3, which is what I was using on my 3080 model, but the higher frame rates kind of make it worth it. Still looks very good. And now the game's running around 95, 92 frames per second in this really heavy area. You'll probably get better frame rates in less busy scenes. This title does have FSR frame gen, but it crashed the last time I tried it, so we're not going to try it. And also, frame gen will just increase your input latency, and you really don't want that in a fast FPS like Doom. So yeah, we're just hanging around 90 FPS, sometimes going a little bit above, but this game, the frame rates are so steady, you really don't notice a lot of drops like you might in something else. Alright, we're going to test Cyberpunk now at 1440p native. When you do the quick presets, it automatically applies upscaling. So I'm going to do the quick presets. I'm going to switch it to Ultra. Make sure everything actually turned to Ultra, and it did. Go back up, turn off resolution scaling. Alright, it's running about 75, 74 FPS. This is without ray tracing, but ultra settings otherwise. Change it now again. We'll try Psycho Ray Tracing Native, which we're just doing this for benchmark purposes. I'd probably turn down the ray tracing settings to actually play the game. I don't think you really notice the sun trace shadows, and it is a pretty big performance hit. Honestly, reflections is the only must-play ray traced setting, in my opinion. Okay, so big hit to the frame rate now. We're in the mid-40s, and I mean, to my eye, the game doesn't really look any better. Yeah, you can see some of the lighting. Lighting looks improved. All right, we'll change it now. Do some upscaling. FSR 4.0 looks really good. Probably better than DLSS 3.0, but maybe not equivalent to DLSS 4.0, which I didn't really run on my 3080 anyway because its performance hit was too big. And now we're hovering around 60, maybe a little bit lower. Yeah, 60, high 50s. Once again, I'd probably turn down a couple of the ray tracing settings to play it. I don't think that the performance cost is really worth it for the visuals. It does look really good. You can see the reflections and the lighting. Yeah, you can see the reflections off of the marble surfaces here. Alright, just for shits and giggles, we're going to turn on path tracing, which, you know, is more of an NVIDIA feature, but it is playable on the 9070 XT. We're back down into the 40s now with quality upscaling FSR 4.0. Yeah, I mean, it's playable for sure. And when I walk up here into this crowd when the sunlight's coming in, it looks really good. One thing about Cyberpunk, though, for all the ray traced graphical features, I think that the generic NPCs do not look very good in this game. It is a pretty old title now. It did release in 2020, I believe. So, you know. Turn it down to balanced, which will give a slight frame rate improvement. I think it's now going to run more like in the 50s. Yeah, not much. The lighting right there does look incredibly realistic. I'll run up here and get in a gun battle with the cops just so you can see what it performs like with some combat. The frame rate's hugging the high 40s. Very playable with path tracing in the 40s, but I mean, most of us would probably prefer 60 FPS. Really to play this game, you know, you probably need one of the 50 series higher end RTX cards. But here we have Clair Obscur. Just gonna switch it to Epic settings. This is an Unreal Engine 5 title. Would not generally recommend running Epic settings on Unreal Engine 5 just because it doesn't really look any better than high, and there's a big performance cost. It'll hug around 60 FPS in this game. This game does not have some of the... well, actually, I think it does have all of Unreal's Engine 5's feature set, like Lumen, but it does seem to run better than most Unreal Engine 5 games. Yeah, we're going to hug around 60 FPS. Does look really crisp at 1440p native. This title to me always looks a little, even when you're running it at native, it always looks a little jagged or upscaled. I don't know why, but that's always, it could look a little sharper is what I'm saying, even at 1440p. I'm not really sure why. But now we're gonna, yeah, the frame rate's getting down to the mid 50s in this kind of busy scene. We're gonna switch it to high settings, which is probably, if you want a native resolution, how it would play any Unreal Engine 5 title if you have the graphical horsepower. It just looks about the same as Epic, and it runs a lot better, as we can see, and I don't think it looks any different, really. Yeah, now we're in the lower 70s. This is a turn-based RPG, but it has dodge and parry mechanics that require a faster frame rate. So, I mean, you would probably you're going to want it to run it as fast as you can, really, to really get on those time those parries correctly. Now, this title does have, I think, FSR 4, which looks a lot better than FSR 3, and it is comparable to the older DLSS upscaling technologies. So, this is probably how I'll actually run the game with FSR quality. And now we're up in the hundreds and high 90s. Game looks pretty much the same. Alright, now we have Oblivion Remastered, which is kind of a technical disaster. It is full of stutters. And it does not run as well as Clair Obscur. It is an Unreal Engine 5 title. I'm going to switch it on Ultra settings and run it at native. 1440p native, that is. 9070 XT can definitely do 4K, but 1440p is probably the sweet spot for it. It's a higher end graphics card, but still I would say upper mid-range. Alright, now our frame rate is down in the low 40s and dipping into the 30s, so this is definitely not what you would want to play this title at. Doesn't really matter what you do to the settings, so even if you have the most powerful CPU on the market, like a 9800 X3D, you're still going to get stutters in this title. It's just kind of a disaster from a technical standpoint. So now I'm going to switch it down to high native, and it runs pretty well here, and even later I'll add upscaling, and it really won't run any better. It's CPU limited, I suppose. Yeah, now we're back in the mid to high 60s. Looks pretty good. Doesn't noticeably look better or worse than Ultra. We'll turn on FSR upscaling now, and you'll see a little frame rate boost, but pretty much it runs the same, because I think this game is CPU limited. Okay, up next is Returnal. It's one of my favorite games of last year. I played it last year, actually released, I think, on PC, maybe 2022 or 2023. It might have been a PS5 launch title. It's actually Unreal Engine 4, but they've customized it quite a bit, added a lot of particle effects. I'm running it native here at 1440p, epic settings, and it's got ray-traced reflections and shadows and stuff like that running, and it runs really well. The low 100s, sometimes dipping into the 90s, but otherwise really well. And this is a bullet hell type game where your reflexes really matter a lot, so you will want as high a frame rate as possible. It's also a roguelike, and its levels kind of have the geometry switched around a lot, so it can be pretty disorienting to figure out where the heck you are in this game. This is that last area. Yeah, the frame rate's around 98, 100 FPS. So it runs it quite a bit better than my 3080 was managing. It'd probably run in the 60s to 70s right now, maybe even some drops into the 50s. So roughly double the performance in this title. Even though the 5800X is a old CPU at this point, it still offers pretty good performance. You can, most games, if you're CPU limited, you're still probably expecting over 100 FPS. So, with RAM prices right now being ridiculous, if you're looking to build a system, I think Zen 3 is still a pretty good option, at least throughout this generation, which is probably going to last another 3 years at least. I can't imagine them releasing the PS6 in a couple years, if supply constraints with memory continue. So if you build a Zen 3 system, you're still going to have quite a bit more CPU power than you would, compared to the PS5, which it's got a downclocked Zen 2 processor that probably performs more like a Zen 1 processor, on a hardware level. Okay, now we got Warhammer Space Marine 2. This game is pretty CPU limited. We're running 1440p Ultra native settings, and it's going to hug around 100 to 90 FPS, but it'll definitely drop due to CPU constraints the more enemies fill up the screen. But this was a title I was definitely running with DLSS quality settings enabled, and it probably when I'm running about 60 to 70 FPS with some drops maybe that are probably more related to the CPU than the GPU. So the performance increase definitely, but in some areas it's probably just going to perform exactly the same due to the CPU constraints. And I was playing this game on mouse and keyboard. My gamepad would not work for some reason when I was running it, so that's why I'm dying all the time. I don't know what the parry key is on mouse and keyboard. Alright, for our final test, we're going to play Battlefield 6 at 1440p native settings, Ultra. This is like Space Marine, another game that's CPU limited, even at these settings. When you have dips, I did not have MSI Afterburner Rivetuner running on this one. Over to the right corner, you can see the CPU limited frames per second and the GPU limited frames per second, and when it dips down, it's going to be due to CPU limitations, not GPU limitations. And this game is very heavy on the CPU, as well as the GPU. But I actually probably would run it with FSR enabled quality settings just to make sure you're never GPU limited. But it seems to run pretty much the same with or without upscaling at these settings. It's a very heavy game, but for a multiplayer title, you're going to want as high a frame rate as possible. So I was running this on my 3080 at, I think, quality, or actually balanced, DLSS balanced upscaling and mid to lower settings, and getting about the same frame rates that I'm getting now at native Ultra settings. So that's a big upgrade. So yeah, the ASRock Challenger 9070 XT, a good upgrade from a 3080. You get extra 4 gigabytes of RAM, probably around 40%, performance increase on average, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, depending on the title. So yeah, still a good graphics card upgrade. I got it at $600 at Microcenter. They're probably going for a lot more on the internet. So yeah, if you have a chance to visit Microcenter, definitely pick one of these up if you're looking for a sensible upgrade. Because otherwise, a 5070 Ti or a 5080, you're looking at $900,000 at least.